are working on the last set of notes for this unit on the causes of the Civil War. We're actually getting into the war today, the title being Secession and War. 15-4. You read about all this information, so it should be no surprise, and I expect people to be able to answer questions as usual. So, here we go. What happens in 1860 throughout the entire country? There's something that happens. And there are 4 participants in it. What happens in 1860? There are 4 participants. There is an election. An election for whom? For what position is there a national election in 1860? For the president, that's right. So, we're first going to look at that election. Maybe. Hold on one sec. There we go. That 1860 election. Now, like I said before, there are 4 parties. Who can give me the party that begins with an N? Who can give me the party that begins with an N? Okay, the Northern Democrats. The Northern Democrats. Who was their candidate? Who was the candidate for the Northern Democrats? Stephen Douglas, that's right. Vampire dude, as some of you know him as. Stephen Douglas. Give me another party, one that starts with an S. One that starts with an S. The Southern Democrats. Good. And you guys don't, for the test, you don't really need to concern yourself with them. You don't need to know who that is. Then we have the party that starts with an R. What's the next political party in the 1860 election that starts with an R? The Republicans. And who is the candidate for the Republican Party in the 1860 election? Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln versus Douglas. Where have we seen that before? Where have we seen Lincoln and Douglas battling it out before? Illinois. Remember the Illinois Senate race that we saw 2 days ago? So Lincoln and Douglas are battling it out, and we have one last political party in this election. The one that starts with a C. The one with the longest name. Yeah. Constitutional what? It is constitutional. Here. Constitutional Union Party. Good. The Constitutional Union Party was made up of border states. The states right along the border with slavery and free, where they really didn't want to deal with this issue of slavery. So here are the 4 parties. Out of those 4 parties, you need to know 2 of the candidates. Lincoln and Douglas. So far, good? Good. Now, let's take a look at their positions on slavery. Because each of these parties have different views in terms of what should be done about slavery. So first, we have the political party that starts with an N. What is that? What was the political party that started with an N? Yes. Northern Democrat. And who was the candidate for the Northern Democrats? Stephen Douglas. And what did Stephen Douglas say about the expansion of slavery? What was his position? Remember, he had a term that he created. Some of you might have a hard time remembering how to pronounce the term. That would be popular sovereignty. That's right. So, Stephen Douglas had his popular sovereignty as his view on slavery. What does that mean? What did popular sovereignty mean? What did popular sovereignty mean? Yeah. Yes, the people in that area choose whether or not they want to have slavery. They have a vote. Remember how that played out in Kansas? Did popular sovereignty work out well in Kansas? No. Leading Kansas. Okay. Now, the political party that starts with an S. Political party starting with an S. Southern Democrats. What was their position on slavery? What did they say should happen with slavery? They supported the Dred Scott decision, and Dred Scott decision basically said that you can have what? Where? You can have what? Slaves anywhere. So they are for the expansion of slavery. They want slavery to expand. Southern Democrats and Northern Democrats split on this issue. So we have let the people decide, let's expand it. What about the R party? A party that starts with an R? Republican. And who was the candidate for the Republican Party? Yeah. Abraham Lincoln. What did he say about slavery? What was his idea in terms of dealing with slavery's expansion? Yeah. It shouldn't spread. Should we get rid of it altogether? No. Keep it where it is. Don't let it spread. No expansion. No new slavery. But you keep it where it is. Now, the Constitutional Union Party. We have the Northern Democrat, let the people decide, that live there. Southern Democrat, expand it everywhere. Republican, no expansions, but keep it where it's at. The Constitutional Union Party acted a little strangely. They just ignored slavery. So if you got a debate, there, if you say, and it was Mr. Bell, Mr. Bell, what's your position on slavery? Slavery? What's that? That thing where people own other people? I really don't know what you're talking about. The thing that's making people angry between the North and the South, remember Bleeding Kansas? Something happened in Kansas? I didn't know. Oh, no. Slavery? I have no idea what you're talking about. They basically ignore the problem. They didn't want to say anything about it. That was their position. Ignore it. If I ignore it, maybe it will go away. Does that work a lot of the time? I know it will work for some things, but do you think it would work with this? Where people are so upset in the country, people are killing each other over it? Just ignore it and hope it goes away. If that's what the Constitutional Union Party said, let's just ignore it. Slavery? Huh? What's that? There's a problem? Oh, I don't see a problem. Do you see a problem? Do you think they got a lot of votes? Constitutional Union? They were only popular in those states where the border between free states and slave states were, because they didn't want to make a decision. They did not want to have to deal with any consequences. That's the only place where they won any sort of numbers in the election. Lincoln, do you think he got many votes in the South? No. Nope. Not at all. So, who wins? Who wins this election? Abraham Lincoln wins. He does. Abraham Lincoln wins this election. Abraham Lincoln wins the election, partially because he takes the North. And the North has more people, which results in more electoral votes. Yes. So, Lincoln is elected president. What does he say? What does he promise once he becomes president? He's elected president and he makes a promise. What does he promise to you Southerners? He makes a promise directly to you. What does he promise you? He will not take away your slaves. He will not touch them. He will keep slavery where it is. Wherever there is slavery now, it will stay there. He promises you. He goes out of his way to say, your slaves are safe. Your slaves are safe. Do you believe him? Why not? What? It's too cheesy to believe? Ah. Margo? You're saying they don't believe him now because you think in the future he's going to take slavery away so they can see into the future? And to be honest, he does not free the slaves. Abraham Lincoln does not free the slaves. No matter what you learned in elementary school, Abraham Lincoln does not free the slaves. Not at all. Lincoln is elected president. He promises to keep slavery where it is. But the South doesn't believe him. Remember, the South believes most people in the North are going to act like whom? Going to act like John Brown. Remember, they were afraid to begin with the Republican Party won control of the House in the very first election. They were afraid of how fast it grew, and now, in its second election, it won the presidency. The South does not believe one word coming out of Lincoln's mouth because they were afraid Lincoln and the Republicans were going to try to take away their what? What did the South fear that they would lose under Lincoln? It's a two-word answer. It does not have the letter V in it whatsoever. And if you thought it had a V in it, you have not been listening during this entire unit. Yes, I'm talking about you. States' rights. It's all about states' rights. They were afraid of losing their states' rights. Now a light bulb goes on. Oh, I remember hearing something about that once. Or twice. Maybe 50 times. The South did not believe Lincoln, did not believe a word that came out of his mouth. And who can sum up states' rights for me? We've gone over this many, many, many times. What states' rights? States' rights. Okay, anything not mentioned in the Constitution is the state's choice. Anything not specifically listed in the Constitution belongs to the states. The Constitution does not give the national government the power to control slavery. States' rights. Hey, that's also the key decision from what? Where did we hear this also in terms of you can have slaves anywhere in this country? Because the Constitution says you can. That is in the Dred Scott decision, yes. Notice how the Dred Scott decision plays right into the Southerners' ideas about states' rights. The Constitution does not grant the power to control slavery to the national government. So even though Lincoln is saying, I will not take away your slaves, by him saying he won't let it expand, the South believes that is one of their rights, that he is trampling over the Constitution, which when we learn about the Civil War in the next unit, we'll find out that he does trample on the Constitution. He has people arrested for not even breaking the law. Good old Honest Abe is not always so honest. So, here's a timeline of things that happened with regards to the CSA. Timeline of events. December 1860. What happens? December 1860. South Carolina secedes. South Carolina seceded from the Union. And what does seceded mean? What does seceded mean? Leaving. So, in other words, South Carolina left the Union. They said, we are now our own country, the country of South Carolina. They were the first states to do so in December of 1860. Now, after some talking, in February 1861, something else happens. South Carolina, between December and February, were all alone. What happens in February of 1861? New states joined South Carolina, those being Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia joined South Carolina, and they officially form a new country. Who can give me the name of that new country? Formed by South Carolina, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. The new country is called the Confederate States of America, sometimes known as the CSA. The Confederate States of America. Confederate. That word looks familiar. We've seen something that contained that word before, haven't we? Where have we seen something that has this Confederate part, or that Confederate without that E? Where have we seen a word like that before? We've seen it. We have seen it at the beginning of our course in history. One hand up. The ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da. Think about our first government. Where have we seen that word Confederate before? No, not federal. Does? It wasn't the Confederacy. It was a Confederacy. It was, yes. The South gets labeled the Confederacy, and the North gets labeled the Union. But where have we seen that word before? Remember that? The Articles of Confederation? Remember that? How many people remember the Articles now? Now that you see it. Confederation and Confederate are based on the same words. And there's a reason why way back at the beginning of the semester, I made a big deal about the Articles of Confederation. Because they come into play now. Right now in the CSA. What was the most important thing to remember about the Articles of Confederation? Logan? The states had all the power. Hey, how does that play in with the CSA? How does that play in with the Confederate States of America? Remember, they were big on states' rights. Something that is Confederate is something where the states have most of the power. The Articles of Confederation, the states had most of the power. Did that work for us? No, it didn't. But the southern states, with their states' rights movement, want to give it another shot. So whenever you see anything dealing with Confederate or Confederacy or Confederation, that means that the states have most of the power. This is going to be interesting because the Articles of Confederation didn't work for us. They didn't work. But the South is going to give it another shot, where the states have most of the power. That's what they were going for. Any questions on this? See how states' rights plays into all of this? States' rights, right, Grant? States' rights? Not about slavery. States' rights. So, let's get to the war. The war begins. The war begins. How does the war begin? Where does it start? Let's put it like that. Where does it start? What city, what state? What city, what state? In Fort Sumter, South Carolina, Charleston, April 12, 1861. In Charleston Harbor, there's an island, and on that island is a fort. And what happens on April 12, 1861? What happens on that date? What happens on that date that starts this war? That is the first day of the war. What happens to do that? Fort Sumter is bombed. Fort Sumter is attacked. By whom? Which side does it? Which side starts this thing? Don't remember? The South. The CSA attacks Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter is a federal fort controlled by Lincoln and the Federal Army. It's in South Carolina. South Carolina says, wait a minute. We are not part of your country anymore. That's our fort. Give it back. Lincoln refuses. They attack. The South fires the first shots of this war. What does Lincoln do in response to this attack? What does Lincoln do in response to this attack? Okay, he asks for an increase in the army. He orders the enlistment of 75,000 troops to begin fighting this war. He doesn't send them immediately to Fort Sumter. He does send supplies to Fort Sumter. But the men he needs to get into the army and get them trained. Why does Lincoln do this? Or tell me this, what is the reason, what is not the reason why he does this? What is not his goal? What does Lincoln not plan on doing? That's right. He does not decide to fight this war to end slavery. It is not about slavery. I don't know how many times I can say that. It is not about slavery. And I know on the test, people will say, this war is about slavery. No, it's not about slavery. The South does it for their states' rights. Lincoln does it. Why? Why does Lincoln do it? What's Lincoln's purpose in fighting this war? Why doesn't he just let the South go? He wants to preserve the Union. He wants to keep the Union together. Lincoln's goal in fighting this war is to keep the Union together. He has no plan to touch slavery. It is to keep the Union together. And to emphasize my point, it's to keep the Union together. It's to keep the Union together. It's to keep the Union together. What's the point? Is this about slavery? No. Lincoln fights it to keep the Union together. As soon as Lincoln starts organizing a larger army, what happens? What happens after Lincoln starts organizing a larger army? Okay, some more states join. Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Not Arkansas, not Arkansas. Another silent S at the end, just like in Illinois. More states join. The thing is, they are not all the slave states. Some of the slave states stay with the Union. Not all the slave states leave. Oh, there's a typo. Oh well. Oh well. You know what it means. More states join. Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas. Some slave states remain with the United States. Now, why does the South fight this war? Southerners, tell me, why does the South fight this war? What is the whole point? You don't want to lose your state's rights. Good. Northerners, why is Lincoln fighting this war on behalf of you? Raise your hand. To keep the Union together? Right. Right. Press that button right there. Once again. Have I said this enough? No? No? One more time? Do you get the idea that this is an important statement? Hopefully you do. Hopefully you do. I don't want anybody saying that Lincoln fought this war to free the slaves, because that is absolutely positively false. And he never frees the slaves. He never frees the slaves. Now, that brings us to, back to this slide. We're at war. This song is the national anthem of the South. Anybody ever hear this song before? Anybody know the name of it? The name of the song is Dixie. Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Notice, Missouri, slave state, stays with the Union. Kentucky, slave state, stays with the Union. Maryland, slave state, stays with the Union. Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, surrounded by slave states, and right on the border, just right across the river from our national capital, was the Confederacy. ladies and gentlemen. That is it. We have war.